So there are a couple of different countries you might throw out there if you were looking purely through the lens of what's good for the United States, an America first perspective. The most obvious, of course, would be Russia. Russia! Why? Because it's the biggest country in the world. It's the biggest landmass in the world, and it has enormous mineral deposits, energy deposits. It's got a lot of oil and gas and gold and everything else you need to run a society. And it also has a formidable military, by far the biggest on that continent.
There is a debate that is raging right now about how America should position itself in the world. And you have people like Tucker Carlson who are saying Russia is objectively the country that would make the best ally for the United States. And you have some other people that are saying some other things. I have some other ideas. And frankly, I think they're very stupid. Like Nick Fuentes, who said that we should revert back to the John McCain mindset and make Israel our vassal state, our aircraft carrier in the Middle East. Israel, you're not bigger than us. Israel, you're not more important than us. You don't control us, but you will be our vassal in the Middle East, and you will bomb who we say we want you to bomb when we want you to bomb them. Something changed after the Charlie Kirk assassination with that Nick Fuentes kid. And obviously, I've seen it this whole time, but publicly, I'll say something changed to the point where he's not even afraid to come out and say these stupid things now. But let's take a look at this debate where Tucker Carlson is saying facts and Nick Fuentes is not only speaking to Richard Spencer, but turning into Gen Z Richard Spencer. Okay, let's take a look at this.
So there are a couple of different countries you might throw out there if you were looking purely through the lens of what's good for the United States, an America first perspective. The most obvious, of course, would be Russia. Russia! Why? Because it's the biggest country in the world. It's the biggest landmass in the world, and it has enormous mineral deposits, energy deposits. It's got a lot of oil and gas and gold and everything else you need to run a society. And it also has a formidable military, by far the biggest on that continent, on the European continent.
By far one of the biggest in the world and the most battle-tested, the most equipped. They have the highest capacity of military technological advancements. You look at the Budapest missile, no one in the world has something like that. A missile that can be fired up and avoid any air defense system in the world. It can be in the air for months on end because it has a small nuclear battery engine, and it can lock onto a target with a moment's notice. It can be flying for 4 months and then lock into central Ohio, and boom, there it goes.
And huge manufacturing capacity. So, like, if you needed an ally to help you in a conflict, or if you needed a country in which to stage a fight with some other country, a place to put air bases, for example, Russia would be like the best, of course.
The other thing I'll point out here is that some people say, well, Russia is our enemy. Well, Russia was our enemy, I guess, officially when the Bolsheviks took control and said, yeah, actually, we're not going to pay off the loans, the interest to all of these Western European finance capital banksters that were thrust upon the Russian Empire because Tsar Nicholas II felt it was a good idea to decisively enter World War I and fight this losing battle. So the Bolsheviks took power and they said, we're not going to pay any more to these Western banks. We're done with that. We're canceling this. They got very upset, and the Western Europeans and the U.S. eventually led an intervention in Russia, Russian Civil War, right? And they aided and abetted the whites against the Bolsheviks. They lost. Russia became the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union, as we all know, led everyone to victory in World War II against the Nazis. And this was not a war that they entered on, their own decision. It was forced upon the Soviets, but they won. And they then developed the nuclear bomb. Stalin died shortly after. And from that point onward, the United States made it very clear that working class consciousness was a real threat to the centers of finance capital, to the banksters, to the individuals that are making their entire living, entire GDPs off of interest being paid on loans that they force upon other countries. They made the Soviet Union the enemy state for that reason, okay? Now, I guess if you have only looked into history from that point onward, you might think Russia, yes, is our enemy. But what if I told you that in the American Revolution, Catherine the Great, Russian emperor at the time, Empress, Catherine the Great of the Russian Empire, they supported the American Revolution against the British banksters that were trying to instill control, total control on the American continent, on the colonies. The Russians actually supported the American Revolution. In the War of 1812, when the British invaded America through their proxy of Canada, which was actually not a country unto itself at that time, it was still part of the crown officially. It was not a sovereign nation. Russia supported America against the British intervention in the proxy conflict in Canada, the War of 1812, when they burned down the White House. In the U.S. Civil War, when the British were financing the Confederacy against the Union, who did the Russians support? The Russians supported the Union against the British-backed Confederacy, okay? Even after 9/11, I think the Russians were the first country to call the United States and say, you know, we're so sorry to see this happen, and can we do anything to support you, okay? So the Russians have really been there. And of course, I mentioned World War II earlier. The Russians have been there in every single way, like a good partner would. The Israelis, even when we were using them explicitly as a aircraft carrier in the Middle East to achieve all of our foreign policy goals, what was that relationship in effect doing? It was causing pan-Arabism to rise. It was causing Arab nationalism to rise. It was causing a bunch of countries in the region to say, hey, we don't like what Israel's doing. We don't like this. We are going to go on our own sovereign path. We are going to elect the leaders that will not sell off our oil and our resources for pennies on the dollar to Western mega corporations that want to just rape and pillage our countries. Okay, they saw what was going on, and it turned them against the United States. It turned them away from the United States because Israel was being used as a tool against all of these countries, right? And, we could go into specifics later, but I want to first show you exactly what the other side of this argument is. So Tucker's saying Russia should be our ally. Nick says Israel should not be on parity with the United States per se, should not be our quote-unquote ally. In fact, it's not even our treaty-bound ally right now. We just send them a bunch of money and we're blackmailed by them. But this is what he said. We should revert to John McCain model where Israel is our vassal in the Middle East. I can't even believe that this is where we're at now.
Actually, I do care. I'm not an isolationist. I do care what Israel is doing. I have an opinion on it. And that's not just because my tax dollars go there, whatever. And it's not just because they might fund some dumbass politician that I won't even vote for. That's not it. I care on principle about what's going on. And I think there's going to be an attempt to sort of America only, which might be beneficial to Israel this time. It's just something to think about.
No, you're 100% right. And I've been saying that for a few years. There was a symposium in Tablet Magazine, I think in 2023 or 24, the Jewish magazine. And I think Ted Cruz wrote an article for that, actually. I don't remember if it was in favor or against. But the question was, should we cut off foreign aid to Israel? And many of the Zionists say exactly that the foreign aid is a golden cage or golden handcuffs, and it's restraining Israel. And what happens when Ilhan Omar becomes president? Then they're going to force Israel to stop killing Palestinians or else they take the aid away. And you could say that, maybe that's where Tucker is coming from when Tucker says, no, Israel's still our ally and we're not at war with them. And Tucker said something on Theo the other day. They were asked about Netanyahu's statement at the when he was in New York for the General Assembly. He talked to the TikTokers and he said, what is the most important purchase class? TikTok. TikTok's the most important thing. We're going to buy and control TikTok. And Tucker reacted to the clip live and he said, why do you think Netanyahu said that? He knows how that's going to play. He knows how that'll be spun. Why does he like Nick Fuentes? Tucker says. And maybe Netanyahu, being Israeli, sees this as accelerationism for them. That if you empower the Nick Fuenteses of the world, then America, like you said, releases Israel from the empire. And I agree. I mean, you got these guys like John Mearsheimer and Judge Napolitano.
But first of all, he's got this argument saying like, well, actually, the aid to Israel, in effect, keeps them in check. And some powerful Israelis say, we don't want the aid because it keeps us in some way in check to the United States, and we have to answer for what we're doing to the United States because of this special relationship. Well, I mean, yeah, it is true that some Israelis feel that way, but do we really think that Israel is playing along with what even Trump wants. Trump, who acts like he's the kingmaker in this region. Trump, who acts like, he's in total control of the situation. Israel's starting wars every other week. They're bombing Qatar. Trump had to go and form like a NATO Article 5 protection for Qatar because of how embarrassed and humiliated he was that Israel bombed the negotiation delegation in Doha, Qatar, of the Palestinians. I am of the belief, call me crazy, but it would probably be a good start for the U.S.-Israeli relationship if, in fact, I'm not talking about just cutting aid or saying we're going to continue the aid, but we have to have real tangible relations here. We can't just be a cuck to you. No, what I think we should do, the United States should do, is say, we don't recognize an Israeli state. We're going full North Korea route. North Korea doesn't recognize an Israeli state. Venezuela, by the way, doesn't recognize an Israeli state. We don't recognize it either. We only recognize Palestine, and everything else is occupied. I think that we should force all of our international allies to arrest Netanyahu per the ICC warrant, the International Criminal Court warrant. Arrest Netanyahu or any subsequent Israeli leader or members of the Knesset or IDF members who've committed war crimes and can be charged for that. I think that's a pretty easy way to get them in line quick. I think that beyond that, Israel should be forced to pay for the reconstruction, and this could be a means of which we could achieve this. I think we should sanction and apply all possible diplomatic pressure on Israel. Whatever can be done should be done. I think all diplomatic ties need to be cut off with Israel, like so many states have done. Venezuela, Colombia, I believe Spain has done something to that effect. North Korea. I think that is the direction we need to go. Some states in the Sahel region have done that. We need to apply these sanctions. So like we do with Venezuela, with Syria, with all these other countries, Iran, if any country or any company is violating the U.S. sanctions on Israeli companies or the Israeli government, we need to enforce the sanctions, right? We enforce sanctions right now to starve innocent people all across the world in countries that are aligned against the United States because they want to develop in a sovereign manner. What if we actually applied sanctions in a way that upheld basic morals that we hold dear in this country and say, yeah, we're going to stop this madness and we're going to actually enforce sanctions for good for once, right? We definitely need to stop all intelligence sharing with the Israelis. That should be a non-starter. All military secrets, any weapon supplies, anything that can be disabled remotely should be disabled remotely if possible within the Israeli arsenal. Ban the Israeli lobby in the United States. I mean, it's clearly connected to this Epstein network. I think it should be outright banned. It shouldn't even be legal insofar as, well, if you register as a foreign agent, then you can lobby on behalf of Israel. No, let's ban it altogether, right? We did that for Russia. Why can't we did that for other countries? Why can't we do that for Israel? I think we should do that for Israel. Those are just a few things that I think we could do. And I don't really know what's going on here. This kid is saying Israel should be our vassal. It shouldn't be a controlling force, but it should be a country that we work with to achieve our goals. And I say kid, he's actually older than me, but he acts far more naive than I do about this situation. You could say, well, that's impossible, Jackson. Well, actually, it's impossible to try and change anything in the current order. You think just stopping aid is going to fix the issue? You think that giving more aid but asking more in return is going to fix the issue? No, that's far more naive than what I'm saying. I'm saying you got to go max, as Charlie Kirk said. You got to go max and apply all pressure wherever possible with the ultimate threat of, I guess, war against this malign actor if they do not behave. And frankly, it doesn't even matter if they behave because it's a fictitious state. You don't the country wouldn't recognize it.
And Douglas McGregor, they're all saying, well, Israel's going to collapse any minute and they're losing to Hamas. I don't see that. I see them expanding. They're getting South Lebanon. They're getting South Syria. They're taking over the West Bank.
Yeah, so something needs to be changed, right?
In Gaza. And they're a part of IMEC and the Belt and Road. And you're right. That is the ambition, is a greater Israel. And people say, It's about territorial expansion, and that's certainly part of it.
Israel's not a part of Belt and Road Initiative. They're not an official member of the Belt and Road. There's like 150 countries that are members of Belt and Road. Israel's not a part of Belt and Road. They are not a member. They are a member of and heavily pursue IMEC, which is the like the Middle East corridor, they call it. I think it's the India Middle East corridor. This is what Netanyahu spoke about at the United Nations. He held up these two signs that said the curse and the blessing. Okay? The blessing is the Zionist belt of trade, as he puts it, where it connects India through the Middle East and to Europe. So he said that's the blessing, IMEC. The India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor is what it's called. The curse, as he has here in this on the image in the left, is the Belt and Road Initiative. Work through Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, so on and so forth. That is the curse. So Israel's not a member of the Belt and Road Initiative, but they are, in fact, a member of and heavily pursue IMEC. That is their goal here, because they want to cut off Iran, they want to cut off Iraq, they want to cut off Lebanon, they want to cut off Syria from the Belt and Road Initiative. He doesn't know anything about that. They are not a member of China's Belt and Road Initiative like the other 150 nations or whatever. Then he went on and said this in the same conversation.
But I am pro-European, and I especially hate it when you get these like Matt Walsh types or whoever that say, I hate the Europeans. They're a bunch of like socialists, sissy, whatever. It's like, no, they're actually our closest allies. They're the motherland. They have a rich, prosperous economy, even to the extent that they're liberal and secular. I think it is motivated by something good. It's motivated by this kind of compassion for the world or, care for humanity in and of itself. Or for
How is it? Europe is like the epicenter of censorship, of shutting down anything that stands for Christian values. It is the biggest warmongering institution in the world right now. It's the biggest warmongering power center in the world right now, pushing for war with both all of the Middle East and with Russia. At the time when the United States is trying to secure peace with Russia, Europe is still pushing. This is not our... I don't know what he considers to be a close ally, but this is not what Europe is. They are, if anything, they are our indentured servants. They are our puppets who have, I guess, gotten some level of sovereignty, but are also shooting themselves in the foot only to, I guess, chain themselves to U.S. energy imports in replace of the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up and trying to cut themselves off from Russian gas. But let's keep listening.
For the planet or the environment, I think those are good things. That's part of what makes us us. And so I like the idea of the European Union as a distinct power in its own right, standing alongside the United States. And I would even prefer to fortify that over aligning with Russia. Rebuild Europe's army and let that be the ally rather than relying on Russia, which you're right. I think they're not us. They're Slavic, Asiatic, maybe be another way.
Why would we rebuild Europe and rebuild their armies? NATO has tried to has effectively dragged us into every single major conflict, with the exception of a few that we've seen, at least in my lifetime. None of these conflicts have been good for us. Russia has been on the opposite end of each one of these conflicts, with the exception of a brief period in time when they were assisting us in the early days after 9/11, and also they were just allowing us to use some staging ground, I believe, in the Caucasus. But in Syria, there was a brief period in time when I think they were both fighting ISIS in some areas, but by and large, of course, the U.S. was fighting and backing Hayat al-Sham, al-Nusra, all these Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates, and the Russians were backing Assad. I don't understand this notion that like we should work with Europe when Europe, in particular the UK, has been the biggest evil force, financial force, military force that has been prompting us to join all of these costly, endless, stupid, illegal wars that have done nothing of substance to help the American people.
To say that, and I regard them very similar to China. It's just like one of these Asian empires, and it has little to do with Europe, at least at this point in history. So
he considers Russia to just be one of these Asian empires that has nothing to do with us. Well, it's not really about them having something to do with us. I mean, it could say that because Russia is objectively far more Christian than Europe. It is a more Christian country than America at this point. As far as you bring about China, China is obviously not a majority Christian country, but China is a far more pragmatic country than the United States. And America has always, I guess, prides itself on being this center of pragmatic politics, pragmatic business. That is kind of the main.
Of course, Nick doesn't like Russia. Nazis hate Russia, open mouth smile.
Well, it's true. You read Mein Kampf, Hitler talks a lot more about ethnic supremacy over Slavs than he does any other ethnicity or race. So there is a hatred that people hold, that whites hold for Slavs. But the truth is, Russia is a more Christian country. It is a prosperous country, if you were to compare it to Europe. And Europe just doesn't hold our values. I don't know why. You would want to work with the Europeans. Also, it's like, let's be real here. Europe, what in Europe do we like today? What in Europe do we see today and we say, that's something that I represent with as an American? What in Europe do we say, you know, that country, that leader, that is what I hope America aligns with? Hungary, Slovakia. I mean, that's basically Russia. Do you look at Brussels and say, I align with Brussels, I align with Ursula von der Leyen, I align with, what's that guy's name? Keir Starmer, pushing the LGBT values everywhere, pushing war with Russia, pushing this climate extremism that's bringing about the collapse of the European markets. Does anyone feel like that's the American tradition of manufacturing, of free speech? They're silencing people, arresting people over Instagram posts and Facebook posts. The UK arrested far more, like 5 times as many people as Russia did for social media posts this past year. I mean, who sees anything that represents Americanism or American patriotism in Europe? Obviously, Russia is far more culturally aligned. And even if you look at Russia, like the fact that they have all these various republics that kind of have unique identities and unique ethos, that in its own way kind of resembles America. Because what is America? America is this somewhat loose structure of 50 states. Each state has its own logos, it has its own ethos, it has its own identity, which are all in many ways very separate from one another, but it's tied together by what the founders of the nation, what the founding fathers of the nation identified as common values that we uphold collectively as a people. That's what unites America. Russia, similarly, I guess not so much with the founding documents of the Russian Federation, but with the history of modern Russia, the Soviet Union, and the Russian Empire, Christendom. This is what unites Russia, and they have these different ethnic groups, they have these different cultures, they have these different subsects, but they're united by a common history. I think that Russia is far more inclined to be our friend than Europe ever will be, and I think they represent our values more than Europe does today, despite the fact that Nick says they can't be our friends. Russia can't be our friends because they're Asiatic, and you scratch the skin, it's not white, it's Asiatic.
And as far as the intervention of foreign powers, I think you're going to get some of that no matter what. Like Trump raises the flag, and I'm sure there was backing for that. And then
Jackson, you look and sound like Nick. Related?
No, I'm not Mexican, and I don't have any Italian descent. Actually, I'm a Mayflower American. My ancestors came to America on the Mayflower. They were the religious leaders on the Mayflower, and they fought in the American Revolution. So no, to answer your question, I don't have any Mexican or Italian descent.
And Biden came in, and there was backing for that, and so I think there's like a low background kind of noise with that across the board when you get to a certain level. But I just try to avoid these displays like Tucker Carlson has put on, where he's sniffing the bread and glazing the shopping carts, and he's in Qatar saying, I'm an American. Of course I could buy a house in Doha. It's like, what? Like, do you even hear yourself anymore? So I just try to avoid that. And the kind of third world is Jackson Hinkle, D-sucking, where he goes to like Niger and he's hanging out with them.
Yeah, I'm glad you do that.
You know what's weird? It's like he attacks me for going to Burkina Faso. And I don't even understand that, because it's like, so Nick attacks me for going to Burkina Faso to meet with these revolutionaries that are saying like, look, we're not going to be dictated to by the French. The French are not going to rape our economy. They're not going to steal our resources anymore. And I don't understand why is such a gripe about me going there and visiting these revolutionary people. He said it's all third worldism. I mean, like, France would literally be a third world country if it wasn't for Africa. Let's be real. If it wasn't for Niger, if it wasn't for Burkina Faso, if it wasn't for all these countries that they've taken the resources from for years and years, what would France be? I mean, France probably looks more like Niger than Niger does at this point, with the amount of refugees that they have in that country. And maybe if they didn't steal so much from these countries and these countries were allowed to economically prosper on their own rights, they actually wouldn't even have the refugee issue. Actually, that's exactly what would be the case. There's a lot of weird things there. Like, you know, Nick gets very upset when I go to Burkina Faso, who overthrew the French government. He gets very upset with the people that were protesting against Macron. He said that Macron is a base tyrant who is like shutting down any and all right-wing dissent in the country. He vociferously attacks Candace Owens when Candace Owens was doing the whole Brigitte Macron expose, and he was attacking Candace so hard over the Brigitte Macron thing. When Candace came out and said that the Macron family was working with French special forces or something and the Israelis to assassinate her, and they had made a payment to this operation, he came out and immediately started attacking her. It's like, well, you know, I haven't seen any proof of that myself. Candace has a pretty good track record, and maybe you should just wait and see if there's any proof about that before you just call her a liar and start attacking her relentlessly. So there's that. And I don't know, it's just like a lot of weird things, right? I think it was a day before January 6th or 2 days before January 6th, some French crypto billionaire sent Nick like $500,000 in crypto. And then miraculously days later, this crypto guy, I guess he unalived himself, I think in a French hotel. But there's actually like no proof of this unaliving ever taking place. There's a lot of weird things going on there. I don't know what to make of it. There's even more than that, but I'll leave it at that for now. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.